such changes to come about, because human lives are being lost by the dozens every year, because as I said, floods as well as droughts in some other areas have become annual phenomena.
Yeah, it's not we certainly can reduce the impact and we are trying our best, but
Us on News Night, dozens of human lives have been lost in North India due to cloudbursts and landslides caused by flash floods and heavy rainfall. The question really is, should we continue to be sitting ducks, and have no lessons really been learned from past experiences of such flash floods, which have become an annual phenomena? Well, you can catch all the latest news from the world of politics, sports and business at DD News Twitter handle. It is DD News Live round the clock. We'll be back in just a bit. There's a lot more waiting for you on the other side of a short break. Please don't go anywhere.
Government see the contours of a formal alliance taking place. Now, when exactly it happens, how before the elections, it's very difficult to make predictions in Indian politics, but I'll stick my neck out here and say that one can see the Congress, Nitish Kumar and Ramvilas Paswan coming together to take on BJP and RJD. So it's likely to be a triangular contest in Bihar with these alliances contesting against each other.
All right. But Nitish Kumar, why you think BJP, instead of voting against the Nitish Kumar government in the floor of the House, chose to boycott the session?
I think this, like the leader was saying just now in your package, was there on the wall. And
the time is all set for political realignment in Bihar politics as well as in national politics. Thanks, Sanjeev, for giving us your point of view. For us to take a look at what else is making news across the country. Pakistan says that it is only funding government-run educational institutions. But is it so difficult to see through Pakistan's real intentions?
Well, it is funding educational institutions. The only thing is they are educating people on how to graduate in terror. So Pakistan is not wrong at all. I think what surprises me is our acceptance of Pakistani statements. The fact is that USA had put a bounty of $10 million on Hafiz Saeed. He roams around freely and he is guarded by the security establishment of Pakistan. So obviously...
Doesn't this prove that Hafiz Saeed continues to enjoy the support and patronage of state actors in Pakistan despite a US bounty? As Mr. Dogra pointed out, he continues to roam free.
Absolutely. And I think this is one of the central features of the current Pakistani power sharing arrangement, that groups the Soviet occupation of Afghanistan and the Pakistani intelligence agencies and the army had created these outfits and these groups. So what we are really seeing is a continuation of a certain pattern, and which is why I don't think there should be any surprise about what is happening in Pakistan at this point in time. We should be alert and be prepared for exigencies of different types.
So, Mr. Dogra, nothing really has changed in Pakistan insofar as its India policy is concerned, despite the taking over of the new dispensation there. And in fact, after 2008, when UNSC imposed sanctions on Jamaat-ud-Dawa and banned it, in other words, it was the government there which took over.
I would give the recent examples of some so-called difficult states and America drawing some red lines. For example, in the case of Syria, they have said if these red lines are crossed, then we will step in, we will start supplying the arms and so on. I am not advocating any such thing. But should we not have red lines which, if crossed, would naturally excite some kind of reaction from India? Because it's not just the red lines which are important per se, it is also the optics, because the world at large has to be informed that look, Pakistan has crossed these red lines and that is why we are upset, or that is why we are appealing. We must tell what these red lines are. The second thing is we should lower our expectations of Nawaz Sharif and his government, because he may promise a lot but his delivery is very deficient. So I don't think what happens within Pakistan should worry us so much.
For the first time, 2009-10, government provided over 82 million rupees for the administration of JOD facilities, and the allocation only increased in the next financial year. 2010-2011, it was close to $83 million. This is nothing but terror funding, isn't it?
No, I think in all fairness, if you look at the way these organizations have now, in a way, projected their own efforts and the kind of activities that they undertake, very often they draw attention to the fact that whenever Pakistan has gone through the equivalent of a natural disaster, whether it's an earthquake or the floods that we had. So what happens is that they carry out a certain number of activities that are inimical to India. And if you go back to a very basic kind of reality about Pakistan, forget what the LET is doing. You look at the Pakistani curriculum for children from classes 1 in India, and religion is used in a very, very corrosive manner. So to that extent, I think many of these organizations, many of these educational institutions are instilling this kind of a negative sentiment, and unless that is addressed, I think we in India are going to face the kind of situations that we've had for the last 20 years by way of the subconventional and the terrorist related activities.
Mr. Dogra, after the UNSC banned Jamaat-ud-Dawa in 2008, Pakistan government weapons or technology or any other aid to that particular organization or its various centers and facilities, has that been complied with? And if there has been a violation, what legal course can countries which have been adversely affected by terrorism, for example, India, take?
Well, the day US announced its sanctions, which also meant that all the bank accounts in Lahore of Jamaat-ud-Dawa should be frozen, that day Shahbaz Sharif, as the Chief Minister of Punjab, is said to have informed Hafiz Saeed that clean out all your accounts. Now, this information came from one of the WikiLeaks cable of the American ambassador. So, one has to believe that as authentic.
No, I'm talking about Pakistan's inaction.
Well, no, it was about Pakistan. And the other thing is that what action affected states can take. I think the first principle, the guiding principle should be that no, America is far too worried about what is happening in Afghanistan to interfere too much with Pakistan or to take them on in any manner whatsoever. So it has to be something which India has to think of, and India has to confront Pakistan, that, as Prime Minister said a few weeks back, it cannot be business as normal.
You have told Mr. Kayani that Mr. Nawaz Sharif, I beg your pardon, that go slow when it comes to your plans to improve your ties.
As far as his tenure is concerned, now the two groups, I think, with whom he had almost struck the equivalent of a Faustian bargain, one is the Islamic right-wing groups and their affiliates such as the Taliban. Because I think we have to remember that in the run-up to the election, the Taliban had attacked 3 of the principal parties in Pakistan ostensibly for being secular. These were the PPP, led by Mr. Zardari, the ANP in Balochistan, and the MQM in Sindh. And the 2 parties that were not targeted were the PMLN, led by Mr. Nawaz Sharif, and the PTI, led by Imran Khan. The conclusion being, or the inference, that these 2 parties were sympathetic to the Islamic cause, to the right wing, would not be able to stand by those positions, and therefore General Kayani has given him this very, shall we say, quiet but firm advice that go slow when it comes to the old chestnuts, whether it's India or Kashmir or the support to terror groups. So we have to give Mr. Nawaz Sharif a few months to see how he is going to deal with the army as an institution and the right-wing groups.
But for now, what is ostensible is that Pakistan's duplicity has been exposed once again. You are saying that let's give him a chance, but for now there is evidence that there is a whole lot of difference between the candidate Nawaz Sharif and the Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif. Well, thank you, Mr. Uday Bhaskar as well as Rajiv Dogra for joining us on Newsnight. Time now for us to take... Welcome back. England has reached the final of the ICC Champions Trophy after beating South Africa by 7 wickets at the Oval.